your source for news, commentary, discussion, and debate at the intersection of the atheist movement and the LGBT rights movement. This is the Atheist Manifesto. From Answer Media, this is the Atheist Manifesto. I am your host, Callie Wright, joined once again by my fabulous co-host, Ari Stillman. What's up, Ari?
Oh, you know, living life on the edge. That's it. There's no joke. That's just how I do's it.
Oh. So, Ari, I coined a new phrase the other day.
Yes. We've been meme-ified. Does it count as being meme-ified if you make a meme of yourself?
I mean, I think it maybe counts a little bit. It probably doesn't count as much as if like somebody super famous memed us or something. But I mean,
those famous memers that make the memes,
right? And I mean, but we have been meme-ified. I don't know. I actually was planning on opening the show with like this big 10 or 15 minute long rant about this really awful thing that I saw on Facebook. But like, I don't know. That's not me. I had like a 3-page thing written out like, F this guy for saying these silly things and these terrible things and your privilege and blah, blah, blah. But I don't know. That's just not me. I don't feel it. So I don't know exactly how this came up, but I was just thinking about there's got to be some new phrase that we can come up with that will express the awe that we feel about some of the just really tone deaf and awful and silly things that cis folks say about trans people that just make me want to stab them. And so from now on, when we encounter cis fuckery, the phrase is, "What the cis?"
What the cis is going on here?
Right, exactly. So, you know, hashtag what the cis TM. There may be t-shirts. I don't know.
Well, Callie, I think you should put yourself in their shoes. Like, what if there was a hashtag what the trans? Like, you wouldn't be cool with that, would you? So why is it okay to do this, Callie? It seems pretty cis-phobic to me. Oh, God.
And we're going to jump into that kind of thing in the first segment of the show. So before we jump into the show proper, I did want to get to a few listener responses. In the last episode, Ari posed a moral quandary. And that moral quandary was, if you could turn someone from evil to good by giving them a blowjob, would you suck Donald Trump's dick?
Important philosophical question.
Yeah, exactly. And we got responses. And there were actually some follow-up questions. So Patrick asked, do I get chocolate sauce for this? I might do it, but not if it's Hershey's. I need some high-class stuff if I'm going to take that one for the team. And you know what? That's fair. That's fair. And Sean says, concerning the blowjob quandary that was posed on the podcast, assuming someone could find this alleged to exist orange POTUS penis, would one have to perform to finish, or can one finish with a swift upper punch to the orange ballsack? I think I'm just going to leave that one as, just however you want to do it. That's right. Viewer's choice.
As long as there is informed, enthusiastic consent, have at it.
100%. And Richard asked, can I bite Trumpinus off after BJ?
One word, Trumpinus.
Which that is my new favorite word. So thank you, friends that responded. That was a lot of fun. I didn't expect that to happen, which is one of the reasons I love having Ari on the show, because I never would have thought something
I feel like
that
I need
funny.
to start a page called Trumpinus. There's this page that's called Benis, B-E-N-I-S, and all you do is just like post stuff with the word Benis in it. It doesn't even mean anything. So I'm going to make a Trumpinus page.
Oh, we have to do that. Like that's not an option anymore. Are you?
Yes.
You are now morally obligated. So first up this week, there were actually a few things that I wanted to talk about on the show, and it was hard to pick just one. So I don't know if any of you are NPR listeners and ever heard Diane Rehm. I personally am a huge fan, and she always used to do the Friday news roundup, where she would get a panel of people together to talk about the week's news every Friday. And I thought, like, cool, we could do our own news roundup. We don't have a panel. It's just Ari and I, because I think Ari and I are cool enough on our own. Right. But I thought it would be cool to just do a roundup. Ari and I both picked two stories that meant something to us this week that we thought were important to talk about. So our first story this week, the Log Cabin Republicans.
Yes, they still exist.
Right. And we haven't really talked about them on the show very much, I don't think. And this whole thing is just such whiny horse shit. So the organizers of LA Pride this year, instead of organizing a traditional Pride March, they organized something that they're calling #Resistance March for 100% obvious reasons. And of course, the Log Cabin Republicans are having none of it. The march is going to take place just one day before the year anniversary of the Pulse Massacre, where obviously we all remember 49 people were killed by a gunman claiming to be acting on behalf of ISIS. And immediately invoking the Pulse Massacre, the head of the Los Angeles Log Cabin Republicans wrote this article on advocate.com that just decries this whole thing as some partisan political statement meant to shut out everyone who doesn't agree with the LGBT left. And he says it should be a time for us all to stand together and remember the victims in the face of this horrific terrorist attack. And isn't this just the ridiculous sentiment we always hear? Like, this is just so unbelievably tone deaf. It is painful.
If you are protesting against a president who is actively trying to take away the rights of you and your community, that's divisive. But if you want to use the deaths of these people to push your own political agenda, that's unity.
Right. And doesn't this generally turn out to be the problem with conservative groups that claim to represent minority interests? Like, they're so disconnected from reality, it blows my mind. Like, the tone of this entire article is basically the cry of, why are we being divisive? Why are we pushing our allies away, like you said? And then my favorite was there's this whole paragraph, oh my gosh, we're losing our corporate sponsors. And
yeah, that's what they care about.
And the translation is, as mostly white, cis, gay men, we really don't have anything to fear. So let's forget about the immigrant members of our community. Let's forget about trans people. Let's forget about people of color and disabled folks who are part of the community. We can't fight for them because it's divisive. And this is my problem with the Log Cabin Republicans, even as a concept. I really need to know, like, what exactly about the Republican platform do they agree with? Like, is it the part where the platform says conversion therapy is a legit thing? Is it the part where they want to take away our right to marry?
It's the part where they get lower taxes, I think.
You're legit, like, I don't know if you were trying to make a joke, but I honestly think that's it. That's it. Like, I really legitimately think that's the case.
No, I went to their website because I talked about this article on Imaginary Friend show we recorded a few days ago, and I talked about this article, and I went to the Log Cabin Republican website just to look up hey, in their own words, what are they about? And they're like, we believe in all the traditional Republican stuff, and they listed the taxes and the Second Amendment and protecting American interests abroad and all that kind of thing. And then they're like, and we also believe that equality is a fundamental of the Republican Party. And I'm like, what?
So I want to put this question out to you, the listener. Would this be a conversation you'd be interested in hearing on the show? If I could get a Log Cabin Republican to come on the show, would you be interested in hearing that? And part of me feels like I already know how the conversation would go, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't want to be the person that's like, hey, I have a question for X group, and then just spit it out to the people who listen to the show and probably agree with me anyways. Like, if I'm going to ask that question, I want to find somebody who thinks they have a legitimate answer to that question. I've always sort of made it a philosophy that I don't know that I want to have people on the show who are going to promote things that harm the community. But part of me thinks this would be an interesting take to get on the show. I'm not sure. So the Gaytheist Manifesto at gmail.com, or hit me up on Facebook, hit us up on Facebook. Let us know what you think. But here's my issue with this sort of whole concept. Like, there's a lot of people who claim that they are socially liberal yet fiscally conservative. And honestly, I'm not buying it. The entire concept is predicated on the idea that everyone interacts with the economy on an equal level. And anyone who pays any attention at all knows that is not how any of this works. If you're queer, if you're trans, and especially if you're those things on top of being disabled, non-white, etc., you are at disproportionate risk of poverty. And conservative fiscal policy, 1, does not make these situations better, and 2, often makes them exponentially worse. And so honestly, I'm just going to go ahead and make the call that I don't think it's generally possible to have conservative fiscal policy and be really pro-gay or pro-trans. I just don't think it's possible for that reason. And this is how you end up with the idea that corporate sponsors are more important to a movement than taking a stand to protect the most vulnerable people in our communities. I am over it. And most of all, fuck you for using dead brown bodies to dismiss an act undertaken to prevent more dead brown bodies. If you actually gave a shit, you'd be in the streets or in the halls of government demanding justice, not shouting down acts of protest meant to protect them. Get out of my life with every single bit of that. I'm not having it.
He's not having it. It has been laid down. Kelly versus the Log Cabin Republicans. Atheist Manifesto,
Right.
episode 116. While Ari cowers in the corner because people are yelling.
That's probably the way it's going to go. You're not wrong.
So here's a bit of news. It's from earlier in April, but I didn't hear anything about this, and I'm surprised. So I wanted to bring this up. Like I went looking for, because we don't talk about atheist stuff on the show, even though we're kind of an atheist show. I was looking for some religious kind of stuff to talk about. So I found out that there was a case in the Supreme Court that has a lot to do with church-state separation, and I didn't hear anything about this in the atheist community. And it seems kind of innocuous. It is a school/church, like, those Christian churches that are also partly schools. It's the Trinity Lutheran Church. They are in Missouri, and they applied to a program by the Missouri state government to basically get funds to help them make their playground safer, like so they could get some like shredded tires to put on the bottom of the playground so that the kids wouldn't scrape their knees or whatever. And Missouri said no because you're a church and church-state separation. So I'm reading this from this article from CNN. Missouri said that under its constitution, state funds couldn't be used for religious activities. Trinity Lutheran sued. Its lawyers argued that the state's actions constituted religious discrimination in violation of the federal constitution's free exercise and equal protections clause. And this went all the way up to the Supreme Court and was just heard a few weeks ago. I think the decision is going to come down, I believe, in June or possibly July. It's never really certain. Advocates for separation between church and state believe that if the Supreme Court reverses the lower court, it will clear the way for the government under certain circumstances to be required to give state funds to religious institutions. The Missouri Constitution states no money shall ever be taken from the public treasury directly or indirectly in aid of church. Almost 40 other states have similar provisions that could be affected if the court rules in favor of the church. And then lawyers for the church are arguing that, quote, the categorical exclusion of religion in this case is unvarnished status-based discrimination. And they said the state's action, quote, exhibits an undeniable hostility to religion that offends the Constitution's essential mandate of religious neutrality. So this all started over whether the church could have some money to put some shredded tires in their playground. And now this is actually kind of a big deal. Like, can the state governments give them any money for any reason? Because the argument is, like, they're not giving money to the church to, like, give out Bibles or do any sort of religious activity. It's just for their playground at their school. It's kind of like the argument that conservatives use for Planned Parenthood. Like, we shouldn't, even though no federal money is going towards abortions, if we fund Planned Parenthood at all, then that indirectly helps abortions maybe somehow.
So what you're saying is that we need the church-state separation version of the Hyde Amendment.
Yeah, exactly.
like states can give monies to churches, but only for making playgrounds safe.
Yes. And our new Justice Neil Gorsuch heard this case. This was one of the first cases that he heard. It was during his first week on the bench. And so we probably know which way he's going to go. But the rest of them, it seems kind of split. So I suppose we will see whether those children will have to have scraped knees or not.
My first instinct is just like, give the kids some shredded tires. Like,
yeah, I know.
Like, I don't want kids to break their arms. I remember watching a kid break his arm on the playground. It was horrible. I don't want that to happen to people. But, like, of course, there obviously are these bigger questions. Man, that's
yeah, it's not about the tires. It's about, can Missouri give this church money for any reason whatsoever?
So my next article, this is awesome. A group of British teenagers got a British politician fired in 3 hours, and I officially feel 100% impotent, ineffective, and useless now in light of this.
Did they hack into his account and post Pepe memes for 3 hours?
So Andrew Turner was a British Minister of Parliament until literally like a week ago. He was at a school speaking to a group of students, and the subject of this local Pride March came up. And he mentioned that he was invited, but he wouldn't be attending because being gay was, quote, wrong and, quote, dangerous to society. And no one was surprised to hear him say this because this guy apparently has a really strong anti-gay voting record. And then a 16-year-old kid got a hold of him. This kid, Esther Poucher, who was one of the students who was at this event, just posted about the conversation on Facebook. They didn't even actually mount a campaign to take this guy down. This was not a concerted effort like, let's sign petitions and let's email his boss. Like, they literally just said, hey, on Facebook, here's this thing this guy said. And about 3 hours later, the guy resigned.
File that under things that would never happen in the United States.
Well, right. And so here's my thing. I don't want to romanticize Great Britain or anything because obviously we saw Brexit, we saw the outright lying and the xenophobia and all of that. But there was actually an insider who refused to go on record with their name. There's this outlet in Britain called Pink News. It's an LGBT news outlet. And an insider of the Conservative Party actually said that they pushed him to resign because there's no place in the party for such views.
Is free speech.
Yeah. Moment of silence, please.
Say a little prayer. Do the sign of the cross. Kiss your rosary for that man's free speech.
Right. So this guy was forced to resign in 3 hours for saying something we hear in the U.S. on a daily basis from people in prominent positions. And we have a president that, well, you know. So either way, good job, British kids. Ari, what do you got?
Yeah, bring that stuff over here. We like to have less free speech here in America because we hate that stuff. This is another feel-good story. Aw. It's another one of those person says something ridiculous and hateful and terrible, and people come together to show that that person's not really nice. Words are good. So there was a Wyoming senator, Mike Enzi, who was speaking at a high school, and he basically told a story of some guy that he quote unquote knows. I don't know how well he knows this person, who wears a tutu and goes to gay bars, or not even gay bars, just bars. This is a cis identifying man, and gets in fights. And basically he said that he deserved it because he's, you know, being weird and putting himself out there. This was in a response to a student who was asking, this was the direct quote, "What work are you and your comrades doing to improve the lives of the LGBT community in Wyoming? How do you plan to help Wyoming live up to its name as the equality state?"
Oh my God. Like, I don't mean to laugh, but God damn it. Really?
Yes. So he told that story, and then he said, "I'd be interested in any solutions that you have for how we can make that work better." So basically he blamed the victim, as wonderful people do. So in response to that, around the state, gay bars and LGBT organizations held tutu parties, mostly at bars, but at other places as well. So this was, let's see, Wyoming Equality and other activists around the state organized #LiveAndLetTutu parties in several communities. In addition to bar parties, there was a Live and Let Tutu family game night at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Cheyenne and a tutu sewing workshop in Laramie. And there's more to come. Backwards Distilling Company in Casper will hold Tutu Tuesday this week.
And we all know how much I love wordplay. I need to take a trip to Wyoming. Well, that does it for our headlines for this week. We may make this a regular thing. I don't know. Maybe like the last episode of the month, do a news roundup, because this was kind of fun. But we're going to take a quick break. After that, we're going to hear a really, really deep and interesting conversation about some of the more unique ways some folks experience dysphoria and some conversation about how that's treated in the medical community. Stay close. interrupt our show one more time to shamelessly beg for your money. We all know by now how difficult and expensive this kind of activism can be, which is why Lexi and Joelle stood up this week to help us out. This week, their money will be used to pay for couples counseling for every straight person whose marriage is now meaningless because the gays can get married. Let's be good allies to our straight friends and make this happen. To find out more and get access to exclusive audio content you can't hear anywhere else, head to patreon.com/thegaytheistmanifesto and consider a per episode donation to help the show out. Thanks, friends! Conversation about gender dysphoria on the show is nothing new, but I recently got in touch with someone who had a rather unique way of experiencing gender dysphoria. And on the show, we're obviously all about highlighting the fact that the queer and trans experience is not monolithic. So I thought this was a really important conversation to have on the show. My new friend Sayke was actually the one who introduced me to Bismuth, who you'll remember from the neo-pronoun segment a few episodes ago. I was talking with Sayke, and they mentioned that they experienced gender dysphoria in a way that seemed unique in their experience of hearing other people talk about it.
A lot of the time, and especially in trans-specific circles, when people talk about dysphoria, they talk about, having one thing and kind of wanting to be another, or seeing another thing and knowing, oh, I'm not like that, but I want to be like that. Whereas a non-binary genderqueer person, I've always been kind of like, oh, I know that I don't like what I've got, but there's not really an image or a specific body type that I can look at and go, that's what I want.
The dynamic that we're talking about here is basically that, for example, trans women, stereotypically anyways, like obviously everyone experiences dysphoria differently and everybody has a different ideal that they want for their body, but generally speaking, trans women will transition masculine secondary sex characteristics toward what are generally considered feminine secondary sex characteristics. So breasts and wider hips. If you have a penis, you may want to have a vagina instead, or if you have a vagina, you may want to have a penis instead. And so what you're saying is what you have, you don't necessarily see the thing that, people who are assigned the other sex at birth, you don't see that and think, that's actually what I want.
Yeah, because I'm clearly not a transgender woman. I was designated male at birth, and so far as the body goes, it's fine, I guess. But looking at feminizing the body, I'm kind of like, well, I don't really want to go that far either. If I thought about what my ideal body type would be, it would be kind of like the robots from iRobot, the Will Smith movie, that kind of shape with just nothing on it. But that's not something that human bodies are able to do, really.
I feel like everyone who's non-binary in one way or another has felt pressure to like pick one, or to say like, well, so what you really mean is this, and then try and sort of fit you into one binary box or another. I mean, what kind of reactions do you get from people when you express this kind of thing?
Outside the medical establishment, blank stares. Inside the medical establishment, it really depends on the kind of practitioner they are. I see a psychologist because I have a number of, I guess they probably related dissociative disorders that have impacted my gender and gender identity. But, when it comes to psychology, the consensus is always kind of, well, let's work on things and hope it kind of goes away. Or, if we work on this, maybe this will fix all that stuff. I've also kind of I've talked to doctors about it and specialists about things, and they are very reticent so far as they've become better at dealing with binary trans people. They really don't want to do anything outside the binary. I've looked at getting orchiectomy, which is basically just chopping the balls off, because I have a lot of dissociation around my testicles, and they don't want to go there at all.
When you say dissociation surrounding them, what does that mean?
It's weird. My relationship to my genitals is fairly complicated, which I'm sure it is for most people in their own way. I have no problem with my penis. It's functional. It can be useful. But my testicles have always been kind of weird. They don't feel like they fit, to the point where at times it's been actually painful to have them. The discomfort is physical almost. So I've actually gone to doctors to say, hey, these really kind of are causing me discomfort. Is something wrong with them? And after, very awkward ultrasounds and things like that, they've said, no, there's nothing wrong with them. It's all in your head. And I thought, oh, well, it might be all in my head, but that doesn't make it less real.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. And you mentioned earlier that medical providers of different kinds will say things like, maybe this is a thing that we can work on and make it go away. I mean, does that come from a basic misunderstanding of what the phenomenon of dysphoria is? Like, I don't...
Well, in the context of my psychologist, at least, when I'm talking to her about things like this, it's always in the context of different things that I'm working with her, specifically trauma-based things. So everything is kind of through that lens. It's like, well, maybe if we sort out your trauma, your gender confusion will go away. And I'm kind of like, well, I don't know if it's gender confusion so much as my gender doesn't fit within what you view as normal. And I've had big arguments with her about this.
That's so frustrating because I feel like even among people who might be totally okay with binary trans folks, if someone were to tell me that me being trans was obviously the result of some trauma that I experienced in the past or something like that they might, even someone like that might bristle at something like that about a binary trans person. But because your dysphoria, your identity and the way that you experience your identity doesn't fit into a box, then they fall back on that. Like,
yeah,
that really bothers me. So I mean, how do you react when those things happen, when a medical provider tells you that, if we address your trauma, that this will go away, or that this is even a thing about you that should be made to go away? Like, I mean, how do you deal with that? How do you address that?
It's frustrating. I mean, I'll say for one thing, I'm really lucky that I live in Australia and I can just go to these different healthcare providers and get turned away, and it doesn't cost me thousands of dollars to get turned away.
Right.
Oh no.
So like, I'm lucky in a sense that, I can do all this exploring medically, but it's still frustrating. There's not really a medical model for anything non-binary when it comes to gender. Like if you think of hormone replacement, there's no middle line there. And I've been told by other doctors, it's just not healthy. So you're either
in what way do they say it's not healthy? I don't understand.
If you're looking at hormone treatments, you can either have the testosterone-based treatments to masculinize yourself, or to get to a level of maleness, I guess they view it as, or you can have the estrogen-based treatments, and you can use testosterone blockers if you're having estrogen treatments, or you can, I guess, do the opposite. There's no way that they will let you just sit in the middle. I've looked at having testosterone blockers just to get rid of that.
Like
influence.
Testosterone blockers, but without supplementing with estrogen or progesterone or any of the stuff that you normally see in trans feminine hormone therapy.
Yeah, and I've just been told, that's a good way to make yourself very unhealthy, which, fair enough, but it's disheartening.
Is it really though? Because I know a few trans women who started their hormone therapy that way. Is it something that, like, I guess maybe it's okay to do for a short period of time, but becomes dangerous after a certain period of time? Because yeah, I know a few trans women who they start just taking spironolactone, which is the T blocker that most trans women take, and don't take anything else. So yeah, I guess that's interesting. Well, in the reason that it's interesting to me, and Ari, you can probably speak to this too. Whenever I have heard non-binary folks talk about the dysphoria that they experience, typically it's dysphoria that may be tied with a specific part of their body, but not the entirety of their body. Like, for example, me, I have some level of discomfort with every masculine secondary sex characteristic I have. Like, I would prefer all of those things to be feminine in one way or another. You know, my broad shoulders, my breasts, my hips, my face size, the size of my hands, all of those kinds of things. And I would prefer those things to be opposite. And normally when I hear non-binary folks talk about their dysphoria, it's more in the middle of like, there are certain things about my body that I don't care about and certain things that I do. Not that they necessarily want something in between. It's just more focused on specific areas of the body. Ari, is that an accurate way? Because I feel like I've heard you describe yours that way. Am I right there?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's elements of both, and it depends on the person. I definitely connect with what you're saying about being more uncomfortable with certain characteristics of my body and being totally comfortable with other characteristics. So I get where you're coming from with that. But then there's also, I guess it depends on which, area of non-binariness you're coming from.
Right.
There is a level of wanting to achieve an in-between place, at least for me anyway, because I would like to be seen as pretty androgynous, where people can't necessarily tell what gender I was assigned at birth when they're just looking at me. And like, if we're talking about things like, genital discomfort, I'm fine with the ones that I have, but if I could also have the other ones, that would be a bonus. Like, that would be cool. Mm-hmm. It's not causing me so much discomfort and dysphoria that I'm going to be actively seeking any kind of surgery or any kind of, remedy for that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, I think there's elements of both to what you're saying, Callie.
I think if I could be Mystique from the X-Men, that would be my happiest.
That's fair. I can get into that.
I guess in a way it is kind of about individual aspects of the body. Like, if I could have zero body hair, I would be much happier than I am at the moment, having to shave and
right.
do stuff like that.
Whereas I'm on testosterone and I don't like having facial hair, but it gives me facial hair, so I have to shave every day now, and that I don't like that. Like, I wish I didn't have facial hair, but the other benefits of testosterone outweigh that for me. So that's why I choose to keep going with testosterone. Like,
if I took testosterone blockers and estrogen, I'm sure I could have less facial hair, less body hair, but then I would also grow, female secondary characteristics that I'm not comfortable with, which I don't really know if being non-binary is so much different to being trans in that you can start being non-binary from, like, you can be designated male non-binary, designated female non-binary, and have very different experiences, I think, mm-hmm. while still trying to get to the same place.
The thing that sucks about being non-binary is everything is dysphoria. You just have to find the end of the spectrum that's a little less dysphoric for you, hopefully.
And I think it's probably a longer journey to finding out what's really comfortable or what you really need to look like than for a binary trans person, because there's no end point where you can really look at something and say, this is what I want to look like. It took me a long time and a lot of different things to even realize that not being male, not being female was an option, was something that I could even strive for or be happy with. I went through phases where I was in I don't know if you've heard of the otherkin community.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just trying to find a body shape that would feel comfortable. And so, I went through phases of, when I was a very young kid, it was like, I must be an alien because I don't feel like I fit in anything. And then when I was a little bit older and I discovered the internet, when the internet was created, that dates me, and I found like other king communities of people saying, this is my true body shape is a dragon kind of thing. Finally getting to a point where I could say, no, I'm legit human. But I just don't have a thing I can look at and say, hey, that's me. That's my group.
The way that I kind of try to describe it to people is that, for someone like me, I was shoved into a very uncomfortable box, and I took a leap across the line into a box that was more comfortable because I feel very comfortable with almost all things stereotypically feminine. And for non-binary people, I feel like society is constantly trying to build a box around you, and you're constantly having to be like, no, I don't want that. Fuck off. Like, I'm trying to figure myself out. Leave me alone.
Yeah.
Does that sound at least somewhat accurate to the experience?
Yeah. And more to the point of boxes, like even androgyny, what society thinks of as androgyny is quite a restricting box in itself. And if you don't fit inside that box, it delegitimizes your claim to it somewhat. Coming back to body hair, I've got a beard at the moment, and I quite often have a beard because I'm just lazy. And I hate shaving. So I've come into conflict within the queer community of saying, hey, I'm non-binary, because often I just don't fit that androgynous box, I guess.
Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from, because I know, for example, some non-binary people who are assigned female at birth who have long hair and like to wear dresses and makeup, and they might even use she, her pronouns, but they still identify as non-binary. And I even catch myself kind of like, what's non-binary about you? And I have to kind of fight back against that urge and be like, it's not your place to tell them what their gender is, Ari. Like, you're not the holder of the keys to the non-binary realm.
Yeah. I guess if you think of male as one thing and female as another thing, and then non-binary is everything else, there's so many different things that could fit into everything else.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it just comes back to how difficult it seems to be for some people to hear someone say, I am this thing, and to respond by saying, okay.
Yeah.
I feel like my urge is to be like, it can't possibly be that simple, but I think it really is, right? I think it really just comes down to the fact that we have to let go of our urges to push people into boxes, and that, just like with so many other things, the problem is not how you identify or who you are. It's the way that society sees you and the way that society treats you because of how you identify and who you are. Those things wouldn't or shouldn't cause you problems if you didn't have the societal stigma or the societal expectations heaped upon you. If that weren't the case, you could just be, and no one would think it would be a big deal. And I think it would be a lot less of a struggle.
Yeah, definitely.
Last up this week, the internet has been absolutely freaking out over Bill Nye Saves the World, which is obviously Bill Nye, the science guy.
He's not a scientist. He's only an engineer. Don't listen to anything he has to say. It's all politics.
Oh my God.
That was me being the conservatives who were freaking out.
So I was actually really excited. I was looking through the episode list, and I hadn't seen anyone say anything about this on the internet, but I was looking through the episode list just to see what he was talking about. And he did an episode on gender and sexuality. And of course, whenever there's something that's in a really big place like that does something about gender and sexuality, you either think like, wow, this could go really awesome, or this could be terrible. So I thought it would be cool for Ari and I to do a segment where we watch the episode and just do a segment where we kind of review the episode and talk about our thoughts. And I will say we'll probably end up going pretty in depth in the episode here. So if you haven't seen it yet, you might want to jump ahead to 1 hour and 47 seconds. So the show opens and you have Bill Nye walking up to this screen, and there's a picture of what are obviously chromosomes. And my first thought is like, he looks really enthused, right? He looks so enthusiastic about what he's doing. And it reminds me of watching Bill Nye the Science Guy in science class. Like, oh my God, this stuff is so cool and this is so interesting. And he kind of gives an overview of chromosomes and what they are. And I appreciated, he was like, females usually have chromosomes, males usually have chromosomes, and like, how hard is that? Well, obviously males and females have chromosomes, XX, XY.
I hope you have some chromosomes.
Right.
Wow.
But he says usually in there instead of making it, and it's like, wow, he's painting a spectrum. Like he's sort of pointing towards the idea that there's a spectrum involved. Ari, do you have thoughts on this opening?
Yeah, that definitely set the tone for the rest of the episode. He spent the majority of the episode talking about various spectrums of various things, and just getting people to start thinking about the idea that it's not quite as set in stone as you've been brought up to believe. He brought up the statistic 1 in 400 people don't have the typical XX or XY chromosomes. So it's bringing up the fact that it's a lot more common than most people think, because most people never hear about it.
And I love this line. I think it's at the very end of the segment. He goes, "We used to think there were 2 settings, male and female, and we're finding out that it's more sexy than that." I love
Right.
that line.
And then we get the theme song, and it made my life worth all the pain and suffering that I have gone through to get to this moment.
It's so great. It's like it's
Glory. It was not long enough. That's my only complaint.
Right.
It was like 10 seconds long, maybe. I was like, I need more of this theme song.
and it's such an
Give me
obviously
more.
great callback to the Bill Nye the Science Guy theme song, but it's still modern and so good. After the theme song, he turns around and this thing drops from the ceiling, and he calls it his smoking hot abacus of sex. And I want my own smoking hot abacus of sex. Like, really badly, I want my own smoking hot abacus of sex. It's an abacus. I think we probably all know what an abacus is, with these 4 lines on it. And these 4 lines are sex, gender, attraction, expression. And he goes to introduce his assistant for this segment, and he actually uses the word cisgender. And I'm like, oh my God.
He's like, who better to explain this than a cisgender guy?
I don't know if he did that on purpose. It felt like it was a subtle nod to like the SJW crowd.
Exactly. I was like, I love you so much right now.
and then Celeste and I watched this together, and it comes down from the ceiling, and she's like, oh my God, he's building the gender unicorn.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much what happened. Was he, if you've seen the genderbread person, or the gender unicorn is the more updated version of the genderbread person, it goes through basically most of the same things that he discussed on the abacus of sex. So the different variables that go into biological sex, the gender spectrum, the attraction spectrum. And it was awesome because he actually gave a shout out to more than just straight, gay, or bi. He actually specifically mentioned pansexual and asexual people, which I was super happy about. That was one of my favorite things in the episode. And then lastly, expression, which he emphasized is cultural and changes over time.
There was the part where he's talking about gender. We find out that Bill Nye is officially #NB inclusive.
Exactly.
Because he talks about people identifying in between or nowhere on the spectrum. I was really excited about this.
Well, I was happy, but it wasn't perfect. I know I'm really being nitpicky here, but because he said there are people who identify as both genders or neither gender, and I was like, both genders? Like, there's not just 2 genders.
That's
so
fair.
A little bit sad about that, but he was trying.
One thing that's interesting, though, is there was one point where he says other genders. Like, he actually uses like genders in the like other gender sense as opposed to. So I don't know. I don't know if that was intentional or not. I don't know if his SJW cred goes that deep.
Bill Nye's a transphobe. That's what we're getting at here.
Right, exactly. So he goes through all of this, and it's mostly just explanatory. And then he looks at the crowd for a second, and he goes, "But I know you all want to hear Bill Nye talk about sexual intercourse, or coitus, or doing it." It's just like
All the
Bill Nye,
euphemism.
you can't be sexy. Please stop trying to be sexy. And then he says that he uses the phrase Netflix and chill because he's the hippest cat in And so yeah, he goes through attraction. He calls out bisexual and pansexual and asexual, which I thought was really cool. And then we get to expression, and again he talks about how it's fluid and it's on a spectrum and it changes with cultural ideas. And then there's this really cool segment about the cissistant. Can I use that word? Can I coin that word? Cissistant?
Yes, please do.
So he goes to Korea to learn about K-pop. And Ari, is K-pop a thing for you? Do I remember that being?
J-pop is definitely a thing for me, and
okay.
it's fairly similar. But Amber Liu was in it. They interviewed Amber Liu, who's like the only K-pop star that I know about because she's androgynous and amazing, and I have such a huge crush on her. But I was so glad to see her because usually there's all this speculation like, oh, is she gay? Is she non-binary? All this stuff. And she never really talks about it at all. So I was really happy to see her. Like, they interviewed her specifically in a in a segment about gender expression in K-pop, even though she didn't say anything about her sexuality or her gender or anything. But I was just like, yes,
yeah,
you're
and
awesome.
it was cool because what they're doing is like what I tried to do in my ReasonCon talk is they're taking the science and kind of trying to personalize it a little bit, and then he goes and interviews people, on the street, and he finds this girl who's like, yeah, I didn't think it was okay to have short hair until her. This is very obviously a great example of how representation matters, right? You see people in prominent positions who are famous and have power and have influence doing this, and all of a sudden it becomes socially okay. And they go through and they start talking about how a lot of men in South Korea use makeup. And I had no idea this was a thing. And I'm a fan of this because I have seen dudes who look incredible with makeup. Like, have you seen the CoverGirl model, the guy CoverGirl model?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so I think he said that South Korea is the biggest market in the world for male cosmetics. Yes. So, again, that's a thing that exists, and just because that's not a thing in America doesn't mean it's not a thing anywhere else.
Right, exactly. I love it. And so when the segment's over, they go to this segment called Bill Needs a Minute. And I just...
He pretty much just goes on a rant here.
Right, and that's what I'm thinking. Like, Bill's about to rant. I'm really excited about this. He does this. It's a really short, it's like 4 or 5 sentences. And he talks about how people have hang-ups about other people's sexuality. And he's like, basically just get over it. And like, people aren't trying to have sex with you anyways for a variety of reasons. And so in the next segment, he brings in some experts. And this is the part that I get kind of nervous about because this is actually the only episode of the show that I've been able to sit down and watch so far. And in the review that I read, one of the things that they said they liked was that when they were discussing an issue, they always brought on people who disagreed with them. And so they had this just like nutso climate change denier on the climate change show. And so I was just thinking to myself, like, did they invite some vehement transphobe to talk about this? So I was kind of nervous about this. And so turns out gay comedian, professor of gender studies, and a cultural anthropologist. So I'm like, okay, I'm feeling pretty good. And the first question is there a such thing as a gay gene?
And the cultural anthropologist answered this question, and she said no. And I was like, not really true, actually, cultural anthropologist. I was a little disappointed in her answer because she kind of shifted it away from that question towards the cultural and historical categories that we have put on sexuality. So they talked about how homosexuality has only really become a concept and an identity within the last 100 years. And even though, for example, they brought up like Greek mythology, there's all sorts of homosexual stuff going on in there, but it wasn't really an identity. Like, nobody called themselves gay or homosexual or anything like that. It was just specific acts that happened. So she kind of shifted away from that and focused more on it's hard to parse out the difference between the behavior and the identity. But she did, I think, overstate that the cultural aspect of it. There is evidence that there's genetic and biological components to sexuality. So
yeah.
I wish that they had a psychologist or a neuroscientist or a geneticist or someone on there to answer that question instead of an anthropologist.
Yeah, I totally agree with that because he's asking a question about genetics to people who have no expertise in genetics. So like on right. One level, it makes sense that she's going to deflect to her expertise. But I do think you're right in that they overstate the case, right? Like, we're probably never going to isolate, like, oh, yeah, it's this gene that makes you gay. But that doesn't mean that there's not a biological basis.
That's just not how genetics works for almost anything.
Exactly.
There isn't just a single gene for only very few things out
exactly. But I do think it is important to point out, like, we do have pretty solid evidence that there's a biological basis for this. When they turn to talk, because the rest of it's more just about identity and how, we sort of have to construct a difference to construct an identity. And I'm kind of with this, because nobody who is heterosexual thinks of themselves as heterosexual. It's just how they are, right? But because it's stigmatized in society, that's why there is a gay identity or a trans identity, right? Like, I'm left-handed, but I don't have a left-handed identity because nobody cares that I'm left-handed. It's not that big of a deal. A little bit of a nitpicky note here. In this scene, I thought the editing was really weird. There are a couple of times where people kind of seem like they're in the middle of a sentence and then it cuts to somebody else and they start talking. It almost feels like they edited the show like a podcast because the audio, like if you hear the audio, it's kind of seamless, but the video is just very like the guy's in the middle of some hand gestures and then the camera cuts away and somebody else starts talking. And it's a little weird. At the end of the conversation, I really liked the professor's telling a story about being in the store with his son, who is ostensibly at this point in his life a cis boy. Someone mistakes him for a girl and says like, "Oh, she's so beautiful," and the professor like doesn't even really correct the lady. He just turns around like, "Oh yeah, thanks," and then says, "Oh hey Caleb, do this thing," and the lady just freaks out like, "Oh my god, I had no idea he was a boy," and the professor goes, "Well, I don't know for sure that he's a boy." And I was like, oh my god, he's not assuming his child's gender.
And the baby goes, "Did you just assume my gender?"
Right. And Bill Nye is like, yeah, and why is it so bad to be called a girl? And now I'm crying more.
Yeah. And then we get the section that all of the conservative Christian religious people are upset about, which is the ice cream cartoon.
Which is it's weird. Like I get the message, but it's weird.
Yeah, it's bizarre. It's really bizarre. My note was, for a skit about ice cream, this is pretty racy.
I was thinking the same thing.
They end up like pretty much having an orgy and like humping. There's ice cream sex or something,
right?
But basically it's the vanilla ice cream cone hanging out with all the other ice cream flavors, and the vanilla ice cream cone is saying how it's only okay to be vanilla ice cream because the ice cream in the sky says so. And so everyone else needs to turn themselves back into vanilla ice cream, and it's not okay to be any other kind of ice cream.
You know, the other ice creams are like, well, what if the big ice cream in the sky is chocolate? And they talk about the other flavors, and I was like, I didn't choose to be pistachio. I just am pistachio. And then mint chocolate chip shows up. And mint chocolate chip is a total badass. And I'm just going to go ahead and say that I think mint chocolate chip is Ari in this scene.
Right.
One, because Ari is a badass, but I also think that it's a pretty transparent metaphor for like someone who identifies somewhere in the in-between space in the binary. And
yeah, they said something about like there's like multiple goodness in this one ice cream. It's the mint and the chocolate chip.
And Vanilla says the greatest line in the entire episode: "Pick a lane, butt stain." And
that's a biphobic joke.
And this is where things really turn and get bizarre. So Ari the ice cream cone gets all sexy and goes up to Vanilla like, haven't you ever wanted to be in a Neapolitan? And it just goes downhill from there. Like all the other flavors are surrounding him.
You're making me sound so kinky. I'm not kinky.
And Vanilla starts questioning himself, which is great.
They even get nuts in there who isn't even ice cream. And I was like, oh my gosh, is this like bestiality commentary? What's going on here?
I think the nuts are otherkin.
Oh!
I don't know.
That makes sense.
But Vanilla prays to the big ice cream in the sky to change the way he feels. And then he gasps and he takes a big old fat lick of salted caramel. And then
they seriously start licking each other. And
Vanilla just gets gay as hell and starts licking everyone in sight. And then all of a sudden, all of the cones are flying in the air and the ice creams are having sex with each other.
They're all in the same bowl, just kind of gyrating around.
Like they almost look like they're ice skating in the bowl.
Ice cream orgy. Right. And that's about it. And then everyone's happy, I guess.
Right. And then, so that's the end of that. And then we move on to the musical number. This one's pretty bizarre too, honestly. He introduces this person, and I don't know, I don't know who she is, but she starts singing.
I don't know either.
She starts singing the song that's like the impact line is "My vagina has its own voice,"
which is cool, like sex positive song, cool. But I thought this was supposed to be a science show. That's where it got really confusing for me. I'm like, this has gotten so far away from what I thought this was going to be. And it's cool to have a song and dance number, and there's like explicit bisexual references and stuff in there, and it's really cool that, you know, that's being displayed and given a voice. But also, like, I thought this was Bill Nye the Science Guy. Why are we having a song and dance number?
Well, right, and I was thinking the same thing, because initially I was actually like laughing, and I thought this was the greatest thing in the world. And then I put it in context, and I was like, yeah, this is actually kind of weird.
Yeah. The whole tone of this show was very strange. Like, I could not tell whether it was for children or adults with childish senses of humor.
Right.
It was all over the spectrum on that kind of thing.
And then he ends out the show by, like, there's these 4 mannequins with this really cool projection on it. And he does really sort of like a broad level overview, kind of repeating that, you know, sexuality is a spectrum, gender is a spectrum, gender expression is a spectrum, and sex is a spectrum. And I mean, the stuff that he's saying is right. One of the funny things that happened in this process is, so initially Ari and I had planned to watch the show together, and the timing didn't really work out. And then I thought to myself, you know, it might actually be cool that we ended up watching it separately, because obviously if we were watching it together, we'd probably discuss our thoughts, and we might kind of end up in the same place. And I thought it might be cool if we ended up in a little bit of a different place after seeing this, so we could sort of discuss, you know, our different feelings. And that's kind of what happened. So the original notes that I had written after watching this were very, very glowing. Like, oh my God, this is amazing. It's funny. It's the best thing ever. The vagina has my own voice thing was incredible. Like, I was really, really excited about it. And then right before we started recording, I went through and I read Ari's notes, and I was like, gosh, you know what? You're right.
I'm so critical.
And here's the thing. I think that I had my bar set way too low here. Honestly, think about how trans people and sexuality and gender in general are portrayed in mainstream media, right? Like, you just assume it's going to be awful. And so I think in my head, I'm equating not awful with incredible.
I was coming at it from the perspective of someone who is already very educated in this area. In undergrad, I took an entire class on the psychology of sex and gender, and I've, you know, given numerous talks, maybe not numerous, but I've given several talks about the science behind sexuality and gender, and even intersex conditions and that sort of thing. So I was like, yeah, this is going to be great. It's just I'm probably not going to learn anything, but it's going to be a good, you know, synthesis of the stuff that I really want people to know about what the actual science is. So nothing in it was really wrong, but I wish that he had given more of how do we know that this is the truth? Because I know a lot of the backlash from the, you know, conservative anti-science religious crowd against especially this episode has been that it's too dogmatic. It has nothing to do with actual science. He's just pushing his political agenda. And if I came at it from a place where I was already on their side of things, I probably would have agreed with them from the way that he presented the information, because he didn't get into how we know that this is true, what the actual scientific evidence is. It just kind of came off as science says this, and this is what's true. And again, it was true, but I wish that he had explained how it is that we know this. And I could have given him lots of examples. Call me up, Bill Nye. I can help you plan your next episode.
And so initially I was really excited and I was really happy. And then I sat down and I read Ari's notes and I was like, God, like, they're right. Like, I definitely am not coming down on the side of it's bad. I think for someone with an open mind who is just 100% new to the entire thing, it might be something cool to start with. Because there are people who are new to even the concept of fluidity or the concept of things being a spectrum. And I think there's a somewhat decent explanation of that. But I think you're right in that he just sort of throws the facts down and doesn't do a ton to explain them in any sort of depth. And so, like, on one hand, I'm really grateful that there's, it's positive. I mean, it's very positive, right? He's affirming of trans people of all stripes and queer people of all stripes and all sorts of different gender expressions. And I can appreciate that. And I'm grateful for that. And I think, it's probably a net good. I don't know that he's going to change anyone's mind with that episode, but I don't know that that was the purpose either.
Yeah.
I think on the whole, it's probably a net good. I think it definitely could have been better. But it was also, I think, 25 minutes, 30 minutes maybe?
Yeah. It's a lot of information to cram into 30 minutes. But then again, there was some time, I think, wasted on the song and dance number that could have been, getting more education. And maybe even I would have gotten rid of the ice cream skit, which was funny. And it was a good metaphor. But if I was Bill Nye, I would have done it differently. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
So I'd give it like a 4 out of 10. There was an attempt. It was decent. It wasn't
Yeah,
harmful.
I think I can agree with
it
that. I think the ice cream cone skit probably would have been something funny if it was just like, oh, here's a queer community website putting this out for consumption by queer people, because we could all sort of like her over it, you know. But like, yeah, on an educational show, I thought that was in hindsight, I thought it was a weird choice because I wasn't thinking of it in context. I was just thinking of it as the thing it is, and I was loving every minute of it. But yeah, like put in that context, it was just it was kind of weird. So yeah, on the whole, not terrible, not the greatest thing I've ever seen. If you haven't seen it, but you sat through all of this, we pretty much ruined it for you.
It's not really a sexuality and gender 101. It's more like just the intro chapter of the Gender and Sexuality 100 textbook. Like, it's just kind of basically giving you the overall summary and barely scratching the surface of stuff, just introducing these topics if you've heard absolutely nothing about them before.
Right. Yeah, that's fair. I think that's a fair assessment. Well, that, my friends, is going to do it for this episode of the Gay Theist Manifesto. I want to say thank you to Sayke for sharing their experience with us. You can find the show on Facebook at facebook.com/The Gay Theist Manifesto. You can email us at thegaytheistmanifesto@gmail.com. I'm on Twitter at GaytheistCallie. You can find the show on Twitter at The Gaytheists, and I'm sure Ari has a thing.
Hey everyone, it's Ari with you again today for another daily vlog on the Trans Living channel. So today's going to be super busy and exciting. So first I have to go to the grocery store and buy some things for the week. Then I'm going to come home and clean the bathroom. And after that, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. I don't know. We'll see what kind of crazy hijinks I get up to. Well, let's get started on the day. Hey guys, so I'm here at Aldi just picking up a few things we need. I got this frozen eggplant parmesan that looks really good, so I'm excited about that. Anyway, I'm just about finished up here, so I will see you back at home. Hey guys, I'm back at home. I just put away all the groceries, so now it's time to get started on the bathroom. Hey guys, I'm back. Sorry I didn't film me cleaning the bathroom. My camera battery died, so I couldn't get any footage. Anyway, right now I'm just having a snack and watching Game Grumps. Oh my gosh, I just realized that I'm watching YouTube on YouTube. That is so meta. Anyway, I'm going to finish this apple and watch this video, so I'll see you later. Well, guys, it's time for bed. Thank you so much for coming on my day with me today. I'm thinking maybe tomorrow I will do a tour of my apartment since I've gotten a lot of new subscribers lately. I don't know, should I do that? Comment on this video if you think that's a good idea. Oh, and if you're new around here, don't forget to thumbs up this video and subscribe. Also, I love hearing from viewers, so I would love it if you friend me on Facebook or send me an email at restillman4@gmail.com. Oh, also, I'm doing a collaboration with the SJW Circle Jerk, so look out for that. Well, until tomorrow's vlog, good night.
If you want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/The Gay Theist Manifesto and make a per episode donation to help us out. And if that's not something you can do, you can always head over to iTunes and give us a 5-star review. More listeners is more good. Before we go, I want you to know that if you're lost, you're hurting, you're scared, if you feel like no one cares and no one understands, you need to know there's a community out here that loves you, cares for you, knows that you're capable of amazing things and that you are worthy of love. If you're struggling, please don't be afraid to reach out. Until next time, friends, this is the Gay Theist Manifesto.